The stars above Earth had once been a symbol of hope, a reminder that humanity was part of something far greater than itself. But that was before the Empire arrived. It was swift. The Galactic Empire, an unstoppable force of advanced technology and ruthless efficiency, descended on Earth like a plague. In a matter of weeks, Earth's defenses crumbled. The last desperate attempts by Earth's military were obliterated by the Empire's superior firepower, and cities once filled with the hum of human life now lay in ruins. People were rounded up, herded like cattle into containment zones. The survivors, those who managed to escape the initial wave, were forced into labor camps, their future lives slaves to an empire that viewed them as nothing more than a resource. Humanity was broken, its hope, its spirit, crushed beneath the boot of an alien civilization. But in the wilderness, far from the reach of the Empire's high-tech enforcers, there were those who refused to submit. Captain Ryan Kane had been one of Earth's finest soldiers, a leader of men who had commanded his troops with precision. Yet, when the Empire's forces landed, even the mightiest of Earth's armies had been rendered powerless. In the chaos, Kane and a few of his comrades managed to escape into the forest, taking refuge in the thick, untamed wilderness of Earth's north. The wilderness had been forgotten by the Empire. It was deemed insignificant, an afterthought, a place where humans couldn't possibly pose a threat. But Kane knew that nature, unyielding and unforgiving, might offer the key to humanity's survival. The dense forests, the jagged mountains, the vast, empty spaces. These were the places where the Empire could not see, could not conquer, and could not control. Kane's small group of survivors, men and women who had lost everything, had come together in this desolate wilderness, uniting not out of some lofty ideal, but out of a shared need for survival. Their numbers were few, and their morale was fragile, but Kane refused to let them give up. If they were to reclaim their world, they would have to fight on their terms. It wasn't long before they discovered something unexpected, something they could never have anticipated. The wolves. The wilderness had its own rules, its own rhythm, and the predators of this land, particularly the wolves, were as much a part of that rhythm as anything. At first, Kane and his survivors saw them as just another danger, one more threat in a world that seemed full of them. They encountered wolves while scavenging for food, observing their predatory nature with caution. But over time, something more curious began to emerge. The pack was different from what they expected. The wolves were not just solitary killers. They were part of a larger, intricate system of coordination. They hunted in unison, each member playing a vital role. It was not just about strength, it was about teamwork, strategy, and adaptability. Kane, ever the soldier, couldn't help but notice the similarities between the wolves' pack structure and the tactical formations he had once used in battle. One night, as Kane and a few of his companions sat around a fire, a lone wolf approached them. It was massive, with jet-black fur and piercing eyes that glowed with a ferocity that could not be ignored. The humans froze, unsure of whether to fight or flee. But the wolf didn't attack. Instead, it stood there watching them as if sizing them up. It was a moment of eerie silence before the wolf turned and melted into the forest, its pack following behind. It was then that Kane realized the wolves were not just creatures of the forest. They were survivors just like him. The next few weeks passed in tense observation. Kane and his group kept their distance, watching the wolves as they moved through the forest, studying their behavior. They noticed that the wolves didn't simply rely on brute strength. They used cunning, patience, and an understanding of their environment that was far beyond what most humans had ever considered. The way the wolves hunted, the way they moved as a unit, all of it reminded Kane of the strategies he had been taught in the military. It was about exploiting weaknesses, about adapting to the terrain, and most importantly, about never underestimating your enemy. And then, one day, when the Empire's forces launched their first search through the forests, the humans realized they had something more than just a safe haven. They had an ally. The Empire had sent a patrol of shock troops into the wilderness, confident that no one could survive there for long, let alone organize a resistance. They were wrong. As the soldiers advanced into the dense woods, the humans and the wolves struck without warning. The wolves had learned the patterns of the soldiers. They knew where the patrols would pass, when they would be most vulnerable, and they knew how to attack with deadly precision. Kane had witnessed it firsthand. The wolves moved with surgical efficiency, harrying the soldiers, leading them into traps, and using the forest's natural cover to their advantage. It wasn't a massive victory, but it was a beginning. The wolves had forced the Empire's soldiers into retreat, causing confusion and panic. That was when Kane realized that the Empire was not invincible. They had technology and firepower, but the wolves had something far more valuable: an intimate knowledge of the terrain and an unparalleled ability to adapt. As the days passed, the humans began to integrate more with the wolves. They didn't tame them, they didn't need to. The wolves understood the humans' need for survival just as well as the humans understood the wolves. Together, they began to form an alliance, one forged in the fires of shared hardship. Kane, sitting in the forest with his hand resting on the shoulder of a wolf he had come to call Shadowfang, could feel it, an ancient, primal bond between them. The wolf, a massive black alpha, had taken a particular interest in him, and Kane had quickly come to respect the creature. The bond wasn't just one of survival, it was mutual respect. That night, as the stars above flickered in a sky untouched by the chaos of the Empire, Kane made a vow. They would not just survive. They would fight back, and they would do it with the cunning of wolves. As the human survivors and their new allies, those wild, untamed creatures of the forest, watched the moon rise together, there was a spark of something more than defiance. There was hope. The Empire's presence on Earth was far from subtle. Their patrols were relentless, their search for resistance more focused with each passing day. But the longer they hunted, the more they underestimated their prey. The humans, now united under Captain Ryan Kane's leadership, were no longer the disorganized group they once were. They had learned to survive and, more importantly, to fight back. Kane's group had come to rely on the wolves, particularly Shadowfang, the massive black alpha who had become a symbol of their resistance. The bond between man and beast had only deepened, and with every passing day, the humans adapted their tactics to the pack's natural strengths. The wolves had become more than just hunters. They were scouts, messengers, and, when necessary, deadly warriors. The dense forest had become their sanctuary, a place the Empire's advanced technology had difficulty navigating. The wolves' heightened senses allowed them to detect even the faintest tremor in the air, making it almost impossible for Imperial soldiers to sneak up on them. The humans, using their knowledge of military tactics and the wolves' natural instincts, became ghosts in the woods, silent, efficient, and lethal. Kane had a vision. They would no longer be on the defensive. It was time to strike back. He called a meeting with his most trusted commanders, including Sergeant Elena Hayes, a former military strategist, and Lieutenant Marcus Greaves, a sharpshooter with a reputation for impossible shots. The room was dim, lit only by a flickering fire, but the urgency in Kane's eyes was clear. "We have to hit them where it hurts," Kane said, his voice low but filled with determination. The Empire's command structure is centralized, but they rely heavily on their communications network. If we can cripple their ability to coordinate, we can start turning the tide. Hayes, sitting cross-legged with her rifle across her lap, nodded. "We've hit some smaller outposts, but nothing on this scale. It's going to take everything we've got." "That's why we need the wolves," Kane replied. "We know the forest better than they do. Their tech may be advanced, but they're not prepared for what we've got." The wolves were more than just an advantage. They were a symbol of hope. As Kane spoke, Shadowfang padded silently into the room, his glowing eyes scanning the humans gathered around the fire. The wolf's presence was a silent reassurance, a reminder that, even in the darkest hours, they weren't alone. The pack had become a family, and their strength was now part of the human strength. Kane turned to the map spread out before them, tracing his finger along the lines that marked Imperial supply routes and communication hubs. "We'll send small teams to sabotage their logistics, create confusion, and draw their attention away from the main target. While they're distracted, we hit their command station. It's risky, but it's the best chance we have." Marcus leaned forward, a grin forming on his face. I've always wanted to shoot one of their command officers." Kane met his lieutenant's eyes. "If we succeed, you might just get that chance." The plan was simple, but it would require flawless execution. They would use the wolves to scout ahead, moving through the forest with an ease and stealth the Empire couldn't match. The humans would follow, working in tandem with the wolves, moving swiftly and silently. They would strike hard, disrupt Imperial communications, and then vanish back into the forest before the enemy could respond. The day of the operation arrived faster than Kane expected. The Empire had grown overconfident, launching a search across the forest for the resistance, assuming the humans were still hiding, afraid to fight. They were wrong. This time, Kane wasn't just hiding, he was preparing to take the fight to them. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Kane gathered his team, checking weapons and equipment. The wolves were already in position, their bodies low and their eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Shadowfang led his pack silently through the trees, the humans following close behind, moving with the fluid precision they had learned over the past months. They moved like shadows. The first phase of the plan went off without a hitch. The humans sabotaged an Imperial convoy, setting traps and causing the vehicles to crash. As the soldiers scrambled to respond, the wolves harried them, darting in and out of the trees, confusing their sensors and luring them deeper into the forest. The humans, hidden just out of sight, picked off stragglers and disabled equipment. The Empire's response was predictable. A squad of elite shock troops was dispatched to track them down, but the soldiers were no match for the wolves. The pack's instincts were sharper than any technology the Empire possessed. They knew the terrain, the wind, and the enemy's movements long before the soldiers ever did. One by one, the soldiers were picked off silently and efficiently until the squad was decimated. By the time the main assault on the Imperial command station began, the Empire was in disarray. Communications had been severed, and the shock troops were lost in the woods, overwhelmed by wolves and guerrilla fighters. Kane's team struck hard and fast, infiltrating the command station with minimal resistance. The humans fought with a ferocity born of desperation, each one willing to lay down their life for a chance at victory. But it wasn't just the humans' courage that made them dangerous. It was the wolves. Shadowfang and his pack were everywhere. They darted between the humans, using the confusion to disable the station's defense systems. Kane, leading the charge, could feel the pulse of the battle in his bones. He was no longer just a soldier, he was a part of something larger, a force of nature. As the mission came to a close, Kane and his survivors stood victorious. The Empire's command station lay in ruins, their communication lines shattered. The victory was not just a tactical success, it was a symbolic one. The wolves had taught them the value of patience, of working as a pack, and of striking when the moment was right. The Empire had thought they were unstoppable, but they hadn't accounted for the power of human ingenuity and the wild, untamable strength of Earth's wolves. The resistance had taken its first real step toward victory, and it was only the beginning. The Empire was not known for its patience, but it was known for its persistence. Kane knew that after the success of their first major strike, the Empire would come at them with everything it had. The shock troops, lost and scattered in the wilderness, would be replaced by something far more dangerous. A concerted, methodical pursuit designed to wipe out the resistance once and for all. But Kane wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The wolves had shown them how to fight smarter, how to exploit the Empire's blind spots. And now they were going to turn that knowledge into something the Empire couldn't ignore. The success of their previous operation had ripple effects across the galaxy. News spread quickly, whispers of the Shadow Pack, the humans and wolves working together to strike fear into the heart of the Empire. The stories were carried on the winds, from one galaxy to the next, until even the most downtrodden, enslaved species had heard of the human resistance and their strange, ferocious allies. Kane stood at the edge of the forest, looking out across the landscape. It had become their home, their battleground, and their sanctuary. He wasn't alone. Behind him, his core group of fighters and their wolf companions waited for their next orders. The time for small, localized strikes was over. It was time for something bigger, something that would send a clear message to the Empire that humanity, bolstered by its bond with Earth's most fearsome predators, was not finished. The first step was to secure more allies. The Galactic Empire had ruled over many worlds, enslaving countless species, but there were always those who resisted. Some fought in secret, while others merely dreamed of liberation. The humans and their wolves became symbols of freedom, of defiance, and of a force that the Empire couldn't fully understand. They were the spark that would light the fire of rebellion across the galaxy. Kane, with his trusted lieutenants Elena Hayes and Marcus Greaves, worked to form a network of resistance cells. Each one was carefully chosen, built on the principles of surprise, speed, and adaptability, principles the wolves had taught them. Their attacks had to be unpredictable, their movements like shadows, so that when they struck, the Empire was already too late to respond. In one such cell, a species of reptilian warriors from the Outer Rim, the Vreth, joined the cause. Known for their brutal combat tactics and physical resilience, the Vreth were skeptical at first. But when they saw the humans working alongside the wolves, striking swiftly and disappearing without a trace, they understood. They, too, had been hunted by the Empire, and they were eager to take the fight back to their tormentors. The alliance between the humans, wolves, and other species grew stronger with each passing week. Kane felt the energy shift in the air. There was a quiet optimism now, a sense of purpose that had been missing from his team during the early days of their struggle. They were no longer just running, hiding, and surviving. They were planning, striking, and, most importantly, winning. The next major operation was a decisive one. Kane's new alliance targeted an Imperial weapons depot located deep in the heart of one of Earth's most remote mountain ranges. The Empire had thought the location secure, its defenses formidable. But Kane knew that, with the right strategy, nothing was truly impenetrable. As the resistance prepared, Kane took a moment to reflect on the role the wolves played in their success. Shadowfang and his pack had become their greatest asset. They had trained the wolves to disable Imperial tech, knock out security systems, and act as scouts to guide the humans through dangerous terrain. The bond between the pack and the humans was no longer just tactical, it was instinctual. They were a unit now, a force that moved as one. On the night of the attack, the forest was quiet, save for the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of other wildlife. The full moon illuminated the landscape, casting eerie shadows across the ground. Kane and his team moved with purpose, following the trail the wolves had left earlier that day. Their mission was simple: infiltrate the weapons depot, sabotage its defenses, and make sure the Empire knew they weren't invincible. Kane's plan relied heavily on the wolves. They would sneak through the perimeter, disabling the outer defenses and creating chaos within. The humans, armed and ready, would move in once the initial disruption had begun, launching their attack and taking the Empire by surprise. The wolves moved like ghosts. Shadowfang led the charge, his pack following with military precision, slipping past guards and bypassing sensors as if they were nothing. The humans followed behind, silent but ready. As they neared the depot, Kane's breath caught in his throat. The Empire had not just built this facility. They had fortified it. The exterior walls were covered in a network of high-tech sensors, energy fields, and automated turrets. But the wolves had already scoped the terrain, locating weaknesses in the system. In a matter of minutes, the perimeter was breached. The Empire's automated defenses sputtered to life only to be crippled by the wolves' carefully timed sabotage. The humans rushed in, taking out the remaining guards before they could even react. It was over before it had begun. The weapons depot, once a symbol of the Empire's dominance, was reduced to rubble. Explosions echoed through the mountains as the humans and wolves made their escape, retreating into the safety of the forest. The strike was a resounding success. As they gathered in the clearing after the mission, the weight of the victory settled over them. The resistance had dealt a serious blow to the Empire's war machine. Kane, standing amidst his people and the wolves, could feel the shift in the air. The tide was turning. It wasn't just a single victory. It was the beginning of something much larger. The Empire would retaliate, of course. They would send more troops, more weapons, and more firepower. But they were no longer hunting ghosts. They were hunting a movement, and the movement had teeth. The wolves had proven that. And now the humans had too. Cain looked at Shadowfang, whose eyes gleamed with something that could almost be called pride. They had come a long way from those first days of survival, and the fight was far from over. But for the first time, Cain felt something he hadn't in a long time: hope. The taste of victory was sweet, but Cain knew all too well that the Empire would not let the destruction of its weapons depot go unanswered. They had underestimated the resistance before, but now they would come at them with everything they had. The human resistance, bolstered by their wolves and new allies, had made their mark. But as the shadows of the forest seemed to stretch longer, so did the reach of the Empire's wrath. Days after the raid on the weapons depot, Cain and his team returned to their forest base, nestled deep within the trees. The air felt heavy, thick with the promise of retaliation. The forest had been their ally, their protector, but Cain could sense a growing tension among his people. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. "How long before they come for us?" Elena Hayes asked, her voice low as she looked over the topographical map of their current position. Her sharp eyes scanned the terrain, looking for any signs of Imperial activity. Her rifle, always within reach, gleamed under the dim light of their campfire. "Not long," Cain replied grimly. "The Empire doesn't waste time. They'll track us down, and when they do, they'll bring everything to bear. We need to be ready." Marcus Greaves, standing to the side, cleaned the lens of his sniper rifle. "I'll take my position on the ridge tonight. If they try to push through the northern pass, I'll give you a heads up." Cain nodded, grateful for his team's professionalism. They had been through hell together, and now they were more than just soldiers. They were a family. A family that had learned to adapt, to survive, and now to fight back. The wolves, too, had adapted. Shadowfang, the alpha, stood nearby, his eyes scanning the horizon. His pack had become not just their scouts but an extension of their own senses. The bond between the humans and the wolves had grown to a level that made them more formidable than ever. Together, they could move unseen, strike without warning, and disappear into the vast expanse of the wilderness. The night passed quietly, the only sound the occasional rustling of leaves and the howling of distant wolves. But Cain couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. He had fought enough battles to recognize when danger was near. At dawn, Marcus returned to the camp, his face grim. "They're here," he said simply. "A full battalion, coming down the northern pass. And they're not alone." Cain's stomach clenched. The Empire had brought reinforcements, possibly the very elite shock troops that had decimated entire planets. These soldiers were not like the ones they had faced before. They were trained, ruthless, and equipped with technology far beyond anything the humans and wolves could match. "They'll be expecting resistance," Elena said, her voice steady despite the tension. "But they won't expect the wolves." Cain's lips twisted into a thin smile. "Exactly. We don't need to match them blow for blow. We just need to be faster, smarter." The plan was set in motion immediately. The humans would not face the Empire head-on. That would be suicide. Instead, they would use the forest to their advantage, striking swiftly and retreating before the enemy could react. The wolves would scout ahead, disabling sensors, and leading the Empire into ambushes set by the humans. Cain knew it would be a dangerous game. The Empire's technology could track their movements with disturbing precision. But they had something the Empire didn't: a deep understanding of the terrain and the element of surprise. As the day wore on, the distant sounds of marching boots grew louder, sending ripples of tension through the camp. The humans moved quickly, vanishing into the underbrush, their weapons ready, their minds focused. The wolves, too, melted into the forest, their sleek forms invisible against the trees. Hours passed, the air thick with anticipation, until the first shots rang out. The Empire's patrols had stumbled into their first trap. Cain's team moved swiftly, cutting down the Imperial scouts before they had a chance to react. It was over in a matter of minutes, but the sound of gunfire echoed through the forest, and Cain knew that the Empire would not be fooled for long. "We've got their attention," Elena said. "They'll send reinforcements, and when they do, we need to hit them hard." The second wave came soon after, as predicted. But this time, the resistance was ready. Marcus's rifle rang out from a distance, taking down 2 soldiers before they could even draw their weapons. The wolves struck from the shadows, ambushing the Empire's flanks with terrifying precision. Every ambush was coordinated with the careful tactics the wolves had taught them. Move quickly, exploit the enemy's weaknesses, and never stay in one place for too long. But despite their best efforts, the Empire's response was relentless. They adapted quickly, their technology allowing them to track the wolves' movements through the dense forest. It became a cat-and-mouse game. For every strike the resistance landed, the Empire seemed to anticipate their next move. Kane realized they couldn't rely on hit-and-run tactics alone. They needed to do more. Get to the northern ridge, Kane ordered. We need to slow them down before they make it to the heart of the forest. The humans and wolves regrouped, retreating deeper into the forest as the Empire's battalion pressed forward. Kane's heart pounded in his chest. They were running out of time. The Empire would not stop until they had crushed every last one of them. At the northern ridge, Kane watched as the Empire's forces approached. This was it, the final stand. But this time they had a surprise in store. The wolves, led by Shadowfang, positioned themselves on the ridge, preparing for a coordinated assault. The humans readied their weapons, waiting for Kane's signal. As the Empire's forces neared, Kane's finger hovered over the trigger of his rifle. Now, he whispered. The attack came in waves. The wolves leaped from the shadows, charging down the ridge, snarling and biting with brutal force. The humans followed suit, launching grenades and striking with precision. The Empire's soldiers scrambled, overwhelmed by the ferocity of the assault. But even as they fought with all their might, Kane knew they couldn't hold the ridge forever. This would be the hardest battle yet. The Empire's retaliation was coming, and this time, they wouldn't back down. The resistance had come too far to lose now.